I was kicked out of my son's house on the night families gathered together, when the world outside glowed with warmth and laughter, and I thought I would be sleeping in my truck forever. The betrayal was colder than the November wind outside. I stood there, suitcase in my hand, as my own flesh and blood told me I was no longer welcome. My name is Samuel. I am 62 years old, and this is the night my family threw me away like yesterday's trash. Before I begin, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from. I want to see how far my story travels. The night started with whispers in the kitchen, whispers I wasn't meant to hear. My son Daniel had called me into the living room, his wife Melissa standing stiffly at his side, her arms folded like she was bracing for war. Daniel couldn't even look me in the eyes as he said it. "Dad, we've been talking, and this arrangement isn't working anymore." His words cut sharper than any blade. I looked at him, the boy I raised alone after his mother left, the boy I carried on my shoulders, the boy I worked myself half to death to feed and clothe. Now he stood tall, cold, distant, a stranger, wearing my son's face. "What arrangement?" I asked, though my gut already knew. Melissa's lips curled with triumph. "The arrangement where you live here rent-free while we cover everything. Daniel and I want to start a family of our own, and we need space." I tried to steady my voice. "I've been helping. Groceries, fixing things, shoveling snow. I've been looking for work. For 8 months, Dad," Daniel snapped, his jaw tight. 8 months of excuses." Excuses. That single word stung more than anything else. 37 years in construction, sacrificing my body and my dreams so he could have a chance at a better life, and he had the audacity to call my struggle excuses. I thought about and all the nights I came home sore and broken, yet still found the energy to sit with him, help with homework, or cheer for him at his little league games. That boy had grown into a man who now looked at me like a burden. Melissa's voice sliced the silence. "Your things are already packed, in the guest room." They had gone through my belongings while I was out applying for jobs. The violation burned worse than the rejection itself. I walked down the hall and found my entire life condensed into a suitcase and 2 boxes. 62 years of living, 40-plus years of hard work, all reduced to something that could fit into the back of a pickup truck that barely ran. I lifted the suitcase. It was heavier than I expected, not because of what it carried, but because of what it meant, the end of everything I thought I knew about family. I stood there with my suitcase in hand, staring at the door as though stepping through it meant stepping out of my own son's life forever. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting away from mine. "You'll figure it out. You always do." Those words felt like stones tied to my chest, dragging me down. Melissa's hand clamped tighter on his arm as though she were the one steering his heart. They didn't look sad to see me go. They looked relieved. I loaded the suitcase and boxes into the back of my old truck. The November wind cut through my thin jacket as I slid behind the wheel. The engine coughed before coming alive, sputtering like it too resented moving on this bitter night. Through the frosted windshield I saw Daniel and Melissa, watching from the window, porch light glowing above them like a cruel spotlight. Then, as I backed out of the driveway, they switched it off. The message was clear. To them, I was gone already. The road stretched out before me, dark ribbons lit only by strings of holiday decorations shining from other people's homes. Behind glowing windows, families were gathering, carving turkey, holding hands, giving thanks. I drove past house after house filled with warmth and laughter, while my chest was hollow, empty. I had always pictured a future filled with more Thanksgivings with Daniel. Grandchildren running through the house, me teaching them the same lessons I once taught him. But instead, I was an old man, homeless on Thanksgiving Eve, driving a truck that might not last the winter. I pulled into a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the cold air. Inside, the warmth was almost unbearable after the biting chill outside. I slid into a booth and ordered a coffee I couldn't really afford. The waitress, about my age with tired eyes, didn't ask questions. She just kept refilling my cup, as if she knew sometimes silence is kinder than pity. My phone lay silent on the table. No calls, no texts. Daniel had my number, but I knew it wouldn't ring. As I stared into the dark swirl of coffee, I asked myself where I had gone wrong. Was I too much of a burden? Did I miss the signs that I was no longer wanted? Or had my son simply become someone I no longer recognized, molded by a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her perfect life? The tea. Ruth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had nowhere to go, and for the first time in my life, I truly felt invisible. The coffee grew cold as I sat there, watching the steam fade into nothing, just like the life I thought I had. Every sip was bitter, but not nearly as bitter as the silence of that phone beside me. Years ago, even after his mother left us, I'd had purpose. Daniel was my reason to get up every morning, the reason I worked until my hands bled and my back screamed. Now I was just an old man sitting in a diner alone on Thanksgiving Eve, with no home, no family, and no idea what tomorrow would bring. I remembered the early years when it was just the two of us. I taught him how to ride a bike, cheered for him at every baseball game, stayed up late helping him finish school projects. I gave up vacations, new clothes, even my own dreams, because he was my dream. Watching him grow, making sure he never felt the absence of his mother, that was what kept me alive. And yet, here I was, thrown out by that very boy, accused of being nothing more than dead weight. The waitress stopped by again, topping off my cup without a word. For a moment I thought about telling her my story, letting the words spill out, but pride kept my lips sealed. What good would it do? To her, I was just another lonely soul nursing cheap coffee in the middle of the night. I sat there until the hands on the clock crept past midnight, until the diner's hum became unbearable, and I couldn't pretend any longer that sitting in that booth was anything more than delaying the inevitable. I paid my bill with a crumpled $10 bill, leaving me with just over $60 to my name. Enough for a few days of gas and food, maybe. Not enough for rent. Not enough for a future. Stepping back into the night, the cold was sharper, as if the air itself was cutting me down for daring to hope for warmth. My old truck groaned as I climbed in and turned the key. It coughed to life on the third try, a faithful companion, even as the rest of my world abandoned me. I pulled back onto the empty highway, headlights slicing through the falling snow. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and I drove without destination. The world outside was hushed, blanketed by white. It should have been peaceful, but all I felt was emptiness. I thought about pulling over and sleeping in the cab, but pride kept me driving. Moving at least felt like I was still alive, even if I didn't know where I was headed. That night, as the snow thickened and the highway grew lonelier, I had no idea that fate was about to intervene, that the very act of driving aimlessly through my pain would lead me to a family who would change everything. The highway grew treacherous as the snow thickened, my wipers struggling to keep the windshield clear. I had been driving for nearly 3 hours, the kind of driving where you forget the miles because your mind is lost in regret. The heater wheezed weakly, barely keeping the frost from crawling across the glass. I gripped the wheel tighter, wondering if maybe this truck and I would simply give out together in the middle of nowhere. Then my headlights caught something in the distance, a burgundy sedan sitting on the shoulder, steam rising from under its hood. And a man stood outside in the bitter wind, waving desperately at passing cars. One after another sped by, their taillights fading into the snow without slowing. Behind him, through the fogged windows, I could make out a woman in the driver's seat and 2 small figures bundled in the back. Every instinct told me to keep driving. I had my own problems. I was broke, homeless, and barely holding myself together. Helping strangers in the middle of a snowstorm wasn't part of the plan. But then I saw the man drop his arm, his shoulders sagging with the weight of defeat, and I thought of those children sitting in that freezing car. I knew what it was like to be abandoned, to be invisible. I couldn't drive past. I eased my truck onto the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. The man approached cautiously as I stepped out. He was younger than Daniel, maybe mid-30s, with tired eyes but a firm, calloused handshake. "Thank you for stopping," he said, his breath curling in the air. "I'm Marcus. That's my wife, Elena, and our girls." "Samuel," I replied. "What's the problem?" "Radiator, I think. Overheated, and now she won't start. I called roadside assistance, but they said it could be 4 hours, maybe longer with this weather." He glanced toward the car, helplessness written across his face. I peered under the hood. The smell of coolant confirmed it, a blown hose. That car wasn't going anywhere tonight, not safely. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Home, about 60 miles north outside Fairview. I know it's a lot to ask, but could you tow us? I'll pay whatever you want." I thought about the $70 in my wallet, the uncertainty of tomorrow. A tow job like this would cost at least $200. But looking at the 2 children in the back seat, their faces pressed to the glass, I couldn't take a dime. "Don't worry about it," I said firmly. "Let's just get your family home." For a moment, Marcus looked stunned, like I'd spoken another language. Then relief softened his features, and gratitude filled his eyes. That was the moment everything began to change. Marcus helped me hook the sedan to my old truck with the heavy-duty straps I carried in the back. It wasn't professional equipment, but it would hold if we were careful. Snow whipped around us as we worked, our breath clouding in the cold. Elena stayed in the car with the children, keeping them bundled beneath blankets while we secured the connection. 20 minutes later, everything was ready. Marcus insisted on staying in the sedan to steer and brake, while Elena and the girls climbed into the cab of my truck. Elena moved carefully, one hand on her rounded belly. She was heavily pregnant. The two little girls slid in beside me, their eyes wide but calm. They couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, twins with the same dark eyes as their father. Despite the storm, despite being stranded, they weren't crying. That told me all I needed to know about how they were raised. Elena smiled wearily as she settled them in. "This is Sophia, and this is Isabella. Girls, say thank you to Mr. Samuel." "Thank you, Mr. Samuel," they chimed in unison, their small voices sweet and sincere. "Just Samuel," I said with a faint smile, "and there's no need for thanks. We'll have you home soon." As I pulled back onto the highway, the weight of the sedan tugging behind us, I kept the speed steady and cautious. The girls leaned close, their warmth pressed against me in the cramped cab. One of them, Isabella, tilted her head up at me, her voice soft but curious. "Are you a grandpa?" The question struck me harder than the snow against the windshield. My throat tightened. Elena started to hush her daughter, embarrassed, but I forced a smile. "No, sweetheart, I'm not a grandpa." Isabella studied me for a moment, then asked with the innocent honesty only children have, "Would you like to be?" The words nearly broke me. All the years I had dreamed of grandchildren, of passing down stories, of teaching another generation, and yet I had accepted it would never happen. And here was a little girl I'd known less than an hour offering me that dream, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Maybe someday," I managed, my voice rough. Isabella nodded, satisfied, and leaned back against my arm. Within minutes, she was asleep. Elena watched the exchange quietly, her eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Respect, perhaps, or maybe hope. The storm howled outside, but inside that truck cab, for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of warmth I thought was gone forever. The drive was slow and tense, every mile a battle between the weight of their car dragging behind me and the snow that refused to let up. My old truck groaned with the effort, but it kept going, and so did I. The twins had drifted off to sleep against me, their small heads resting on my arm, their soft breaths steady. Elena sat quietly, occasionally checking the GPS on her phone and giving me calm directions. After nearly an hour, faint lights began to appear through the curtain of falling snow. At first I thought it was just another small town, maybe a cluster of houses along a country road. But then the road narrowed and curved, and soon we turned onto a long driveway flanked by tall iron gates that slowly swung open. I frowned, thinking I must have misheard. "This is your place?" Elena gave a small smile. "Almost there?" The headlights swept across immaculate lawns, carefully trimmed hedges now blanketed in white, and a fountain covered for the winter. The driveway stretched on, the kind of winding path I'd only ever seen in magazines. And then, through the storm, the house appeared, or rather, the mansion. 3 stories of stone and wood rose into the night, every window glowing warmly, casting golden light across the snow. Even in the storm, I could see the details, the balconies, the tall chimneys, the kind of careful architecture that screamed wealth. My jaw tightened. This wasn't just comfort, this was another world entirely. We rolled to a stop near the massive front doors. As soon as the truck idled, the front entrance burst open, and a woman hurried out, her robe pulled tight against the cold. She had graying hair, kind eyes, and an expression of pure relief. "Thank goodness you're safe," she called, rushing to Elena's side as she carefully stepped out with her swollen belly. "When Marcus said you were stranded, I was worried sick." "We're fine, Maria," Elena assured her, nodding toward me. "Thanks to him." Maria turned to me, eyes shining. "Bless you, truly." Marcus was already outside, unhooking the straps, and I joined him, grateful for something to do with my hands. My stomach twisted as I glanced back at the mansion. I felt like a stray dog who'd wandered into a castle courtyard. Everything about this place told me I didn't belong. "Samuel," Marcus said as we finished freeing the sedan, his voice warm but firm, "I can't thank you enough. Please come inside. You need to warm up." "I should get going," I said, though the thought of climbing back into that cold truck made my bones ache. Elena's voice was gentle but steady. "It's nearly 4 in the morning. You just saved us. Please, come in." And then I felt a tug at my sleeve. Sophia, now fully awake, looking at me with sleepy eyes. "Come inside with us, Grandpa Samuel." And just like that, I couldn't refuse. Crossing the threshold felt like stepping into another universe. The blast of warmth hit me first, followed by the sight of a grand foyer that took my breath away. Gleaming hardwood stretched across the floor, and a sweeping staircase curved upward like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, casting a golden glow that reflected off framed artwork and rugs that probably cost more than my truck. Maria guided the twins upstairs, promising hot chocolate and warm pajamas. They protested, insisting they wanted to stay with me, but Elena reassured them gently. "Grandpa Samuel will be here in the morning." I froze at the sound of it. Grandpa Samuel. The words settled into me like an ember catching flame. I hadn't earned it, not yet, but hearing it lit a warmth in me that coffee never could. Marcus gestured toward a study off the main hall. A fire roared in the stone fireplace, and shelves lined with books stretched to the ceiling. He poured whiskey into 2 glasses and handed one to me. "To good men," he said simply. I hesitated before clinking my glass against his. The amber liquid burned as it slid down, but the warmth it spread through my chest was welcome. "You didn't have to stop tonight," Marcus said, his tone thoughtful. "Most people wouldn't have." "I know what it's like to be stranded," I admitted quietly. "To need help and watch the world drive by." His eyes narrowed slightly, reading more in my words than I wanted to share. "That sounds like experience talking." I stared into the fire. For a moment I thought about keeping silent, but something about the crackle of flames and the openness in his gaze made me speak. "My son threw me out tonight, said I was a burden, told me to pack my things and leave." Marcus set his glass down slowly. "Your own son?" I nodded, swallowing hard. 8 months I've been out of work. Did my best to help around the house, but it wasn't enough for him. Or for her. They cleared out the guest room while I was gone. Told me I had nowhere there anymore. For a moment Marcus said nothing. He just studied me, firelight flickering across his face. Then he reached over and placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You're here now, and you're not a burden." The words were simple, but they hit deeper than he could have known. The fire snapped softly in the hearth, filling the silence between us. Marcus leaned back in his chair, swirling the whiskey in his glass, his expression heavy with thought. "Can I tell you something about my father?" he asked finally. I nodded, unsure where this was going. He was a builder. Spent his whole life working with his hands, rough around the edges but honest. He taught me everything I know about hard work. But when I was 16, I told him I hated him. Said I wished he wasn't my dad. Marcus's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the flames. It was the only time he ever slapped me. I stormed out and didn't look back. I stayed quiet, letting him speak. My mother begged me to apologize. I wouldn't. Pride kept me away. I thought proving I could make it on my own was enough, and for years it was. I made money, bought this house, built a business, and all the while my father drove by my office just to catch a glimpse of me. He never stopped caring. By the time I swallowed my pride, he was in a hospital bed with cancer, too weak to understand what I was trying to say. Marcus's voice broke, and for a moment he looked far younger than his years. I've lived with that regret every single day since. I stared at the fire, feeling the weight of his confession settle into the room. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. He nodded once, then turned his eyes back to me. "That's why I stopped tonight. When I saw you standing there in the snow, helping strangers without asking for a thing in return, I saw him, my father, and when you told me what your son did to you, I saw something else." "What's that?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "A second chance." The words landed like a stone in my chest. I shifted uncomfortably, not sure I'd heard him right. A second chance for what? Marcus set his glass down and leaned forward, his gaze unflinching. "For both of us. Samuel, I want you to stay here, not just tonight. Stay. Be part of this family." I blinked, stunned. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said firmly. "You risked your safety for people you didn't owe a thing to. You refused money when you clearly needed it. You raised a son on your own. That tells me all I need to know." I shook my head, heart pounding. "That sounds like charity, and I won't be anyone's charity case." Marcus's eyes softened, but his voice was steady. "This isn't charity. This is family." The room fell silent again, except this time it wasn't the fire filling the space. It was the weight of a choice I wasn't ready to make. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Family. I wanted to believe him, wanted to grab hold of the lifeline he was offering, but another part of me recoiled. I had spent months being told I was a burden, dead weight, useless. To suddenly be told I was wanted, it felt dangerous, too good to be true. I set my glass down on the table, my hand trembling just enough for Marcus to notice. "You don't understand," I said quietly. "I've spent my life standing on my own. If I stay here, I'll always feel like I owe you, like I'm nothing more than your charity project." Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but unwavering. "Samuel, listen to me. If I wanted charity, I'd write a check. To a stranger. I don't need another mouth to feed. What I need, what my wife and daughters need, is someone who can give them the kind of love money can't buy. We're asking you to stay because you matter, not because you're convenient." His words should have comforted me, but instead they made my chest ache. I looked into the fire, watching the flames devour the logs, and all I could think was how easily my son had cast me out. How could these people, strangers I'd met only hours ago, see value in me when my own blood had not? I stood abruptly, needing distance. "I appreciate what you're offering, but this is too much, too fast." My voice cracked, despite my efforts to sound steady. "I need air." Marcus didn't stop me. He simply nodded toward the staircase. "The guest room is upstairs. Second door on the right. Sleep on it. Think about what I said." I hesitated, torn between bolting back into the night and collapsing into the comfort I was being offered. Pride wanted me to walk out the door and never look back, but exhaustion weighed me down like chains. Without another word, I turned and climbed the stairs, each step echoing in the vast silence of that mansion. The guest room was larger than the apartment I'd once rented. A king-size bed, thick curtains, furniture polished to a shine. I sank onto the mattress, my body aching, my mind spinning. I stared at the ceiling, unable to close my eyes. The question kept circling in my head, louder than the storm outside. Was this really an opportunity, or was I about to lose myself to the kindness of strangers? I lay there in the dark, the firelight from the hallway flickering faintly under the door, the silence pressing down heavier than any blanket. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind spun with Marcus's words, with the memory of Daniel's cold voice, with the hollow ache of being unwanted by the one person I had sacrificed everything for. A soft knock broke the silence. "Come in," I called, expecting Marcus. But it was Elena, wrapped in a robe, her swollen belly leading her into the room. She carried a steaming mug in her hands. "I brought you some tea," she said gently, setting it on the nightstand. "Chamomile. It helps with sleep." "Thank you," I murmured, pulling myself upright against the headboard. "You didn't have to." She sank into the chair beside the bed with a quiet sigh, one hand resting on her belly. "Marcus told me about your conversation," she said, her tone direct but kind. Heat crept into my cheeks. "I hope he didn't speak out of turn. This is your home, your family. You should have a say in any decision." "You're right," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. "And that's exactly why I'm here." For a moment she was quiet, as if gathering her thoughts. "When Marcus and I moved back here 5 years ago, he wasn't just successful, he was empty. He threw himself into work, haunted by what he'd lost with his father. I was afraid we were going to lose him to that regret. Then 2 years ago, we went to our daughter's school for a Grandfather's Day event. All the other kids had someone there. Sophia and Isabella sat alone. That night, Marcus cried for the first time since I'd met him. He told me he couldn't change the past, but he could change the future. That's why, when he met you tonight, he saw something more than just a good man helping strangers. He saw healing." I stared at her, unable to speak. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes searching mine. "Samuel, you think this is charity. It isn't. It's an invitation. Marcus and I don't need another man to shovel snow or fix leaky faucets. We need someone who can be what money cannot buy, a grandfather to our girls, a father figure to Marcus, and maybe a man who finally feels wanted again." The tea's steam curled upward, and I wrapped my hands around the mug just to keep them steady. I wanted to argue, to retreat into pride, but her words burrowed deep. For the first time in years, someone wasn't asking me to leave. They were asking me to stay. After Elena left, the room was quiet again, but her words refused to leave me. I sat with the tea cooling in my hands, staring out the window at the snow falling steadily across the grounds. The mansion looked peaceful from up here, but my mind was anything but. I kept replaying the same question. What do I really need? For months, I'd been obsessed with survival, finding a bed, finding food, stretching every dollar until it screamed. But tonight, with a full stomach, a roof over my head, and warmth at my back, I realized survival wasn't the answer. What I needed was purpose. What I needed was to matter to someone. The truth hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I had been wandering, not just the highways, but my own life, searching for a reason to keep going. When Isabella asked if I was a grandpa, it was like she had seen straight through me. That was the question I had never dared to ask myself. What if I still had more to give? What if my life wasn't over yet? I thought about the girls leaning against me in the truck, trusting me without hesitation. I thought about Marcus looking at me like I was more than a washed-up old man, and Elena, who had every reason to be protective, had instead welcomed me with gentle conviction. They didn't see a burden. They saw something I couldn't see in myself anymore. But then my pride reared its head again. What if I stayed, and one day they looked at me the way Daniel had? What if I poured myself into this family, only to be tossed aside when I was no longer useful? I had lived that heartbreak once. I wasn't sure I could survive it a second time. I rubbed my hands over my face, exhaustion dragging at me. My body longed for rest, but my mind refused to quiet. Outside, the snowstorm began to ease, the world blanketed in silence. For most people, snow meant beauty, purity, a fresh start. For me, it had always meant hard work, shoveling driveways, clearing paths, aching muscles. Yet tonight, as I watched it coat the grounds in white, I felt the faintest whisper that maybe, just maybe, it could mean something else, a new beginning. When dawn finally broke, I hadn't slept a minute, but I had made one quiet promise to myself. I would stay, at least for a while, not because I wanted their charity, but because, for the first time in a long time, I wanted to believe I still belonged somewhere. The days that followed moved faster than I expected. What started as one night in a guest room turned into a week, then 2, and soon I realized 6 weeks had passed. And I kept telling myself I would leave soon, that I didn't belong in a place like this. But every time I looked at Sophia and Isabella, every time Elena smiled at me across the breakfast table, every time Marcus poured me a cup of coffee before heading to work, the thought of leaving grew harder. Marcus wasn't bluffing about work either. A few days after that first night, he introduced me to his business partner, who oversaw several commercial properties. "We need someone reliable to manage maintenance," the man said. "Basic repairs, keeping tenants happy. Nothing glamorous, but steady work." I wanted to protest, to say I wasn't strong enough anymore, but Marcus spoke before I could. "You'll be perfect for it." So I tried, and to my surprise, I found that I could still do it. Changing light fixtures, patching drywall, clearing snow from walkways. It wasn't the back-breaking labor of my construction years, but it was enough to make me feel useful again. My paycheck wasn't huge, but it was mine, the first I had earned in nearly a year. The dignity that came with it was worth more than the money. Back at the house, I found myself slowly slipping into a role I didn't know I'd been missing. Sophia brought me her math homework, and I sat with her at the kitchen table, teaching her the tricks I'd once taught Daniel. Isabella followed me around outside, eager to learn how to braid rope for a Girl Scout project, her little hands clumsy but determined. Even Maria, the housekeeper, started leaving a few household repairs undone, smiling as she'd say, "I'll let Samuel handle that." Elena often sat with me in the evenings, her hand resting on her belly as she talked about the baby on the way. She trusted me enough to share her fears, the long nights ahead, the worry of raising 3 children. I listened, offering quiet reassurance, surprised at how natural it felt. Each morning I woke up not to silence, but to laughter echoing through the halls. Each night I went to bed knowing that someone, somewhere in that mansion, was glad I was there. I still carried the ache of Daniel's betrayal, but it no longer defined me. For the first time in months, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. I felt alive. It was on an ordinary Tuesday that the past came clawing back. I was in the lobby of one of the office buildings, balancing on a ladder while replacing a light fixture, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The number wasn't familiar, but something in me made me answer. "Dad?" My hands froze on the screwdriver. The voice was shaky, younger somehow, like it belonged to the boy I used to know, instead of the man who had thrown me out. "Daniel?" I whispered. "Yeah, it's me." There was a pause on the line, heavy and awkward. I had to call around to find your number. One of your old co-workers gave it to me." I climbed down slowly, my heart thudding. "How did you know where to reach me?" "I didn't. Needed to hear your voice. Dad, we need to talk. I stared out the glass doors at the snow falling on the sidewalk, my throat dry. We had our talk 6 weeks ago, remember? You made your position pretty clear. Please, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Can I come see you? I know you're somewhere near Fairview. I can drive up this weekend. Every instinct told me to hang up. He had tossed me aside like I was nothing, and I had finally found a place where I wasn't treated like dead weight. But no matter how much hurt lingered, this was still my son. A sliver of hope, stubborn and uninvited, wedged itself into my chest. Why now? I asked carefully. A long pause. Then his answer. Because I miss you. Because Melissa and I, maybe we were too harsh. We want to make things right. It was a lie. I heard it in the way his voice cracked, the same tone he used as a teenager when he was covering his tracks. Still, against my better judgment, I found myself saying, Fine, Sunday afternoon, I'll send you the address. When I hung up, my hands were trembling. For the rest of the week, I carried a heaviness I couldn't shake. Marcus and Elena noticed, though I didn't give them details. The girls, of course, were excited. Is he nice like you, Grandpa Samuel? Sophia asked one morning at breakfast. I smiled weakly, unable to answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know anymore. Sunday arrived gray and cold, a stillness in the air that made every minute feel heavier than the last. I paced the living room, my palms damp, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to ask. Through the wide windows, I finally saw their car crawl up the long driveway. It stopped in front of the house, and I watched as Daniel stepped out, his eyes widening at the sight of the mansion towering before him. Melissa followed, her gaze sweeping over the grounds with a sharp calculation I knew too well. She wasn't admiring, it was appraisal, as though she were tallying up the value of every stone and window. My stomach sank. This wasn't about me. Marcus answered the door with his usual steady warmth, and I heard their greetings from the hall. Daniel's voice was overly cheerful, the way he sounded when he wanted to impress someone. Melissa's laugh rang high and artificial. I braced myself as they entered the room. Dad, Daniel said, spreading his arms as if the last 6 weeks hadn't happened. Look at you, living in luxury. I stayed by the fireplace, unmoving. Daniel, Melissa. He hesitated when I didn't step forward to embrace him. Melissa's smile flickered but didn't fade as her eyes swept across the polished wood and expensive art. This place is stunning. You must feel like a king here. Marcus and Elena have been kind, I replied evenly. Daniel glanced at Marcus, who had stepped into the room with us. Must be nice having wealthy friends, he muttered, a hint of envy creeping into his voice. Marcus, polite as ever, offered to give us privacy, but I stopped him. Stay, I said firmly. There's no need for secrets. Daniel shifted awkwardly, then cleared his throat. Dad, listen, we've been thinking. Maybe we made a mistake that night. Maybe we let stress get the better of us. Melissa slid closer, her voice smooth as silk. We want to make things right. Family's it. Arg, but they always come back together. Don't you agree? Her words dripped with honey, but her eyes never left the chandelier above us, or the rug under her feet, or the gold-framed paintings lining the walls. And suddenly I saw it all, as clear as the snow outside. They weren't here for me. They were here for what they thought I had gained. My chest tightened as I realized the reckoning I had been dreading all week was only just beginning. The silence between us stretched thin until Daniel finally broke it, his voice softer now, almost rehearsed. Dad, things haven't been easy. The truth is, my hours got cut back. The mortgage payment went up. We're behind, and the bank is breathing down our necks. There it was, the truth he hadn't dared to admit on the phone. Melissa jumped in before I could speak, her tone smooth and urgent. We thought maybe, since you're living here, since you're clearly in good hands, you could put in a word for us. Maybe Marcus could help us out. Just a loan to get us through. My jaw tightened. You want me to ask Marcus for money? Daniel raised his hands quickly. Not for us. For you. You're part of this family now, right? Surely he'd want to help his friend's son. I stared at him, my chest burning. He wasn't asking me to reconcile. He wasn't here because he missed me. He was here because he saw dollar signs. Daniel, do you hear yourself? I asked quietly. I hear a son trying to save his family, he shot back, his voice rising. I'm willing to swallow my pride to protect Melissa, to keep a roof over our heads. Isn't that what you always taught me? To do whatever it takes for the people you love? Melissa stepped closer, her eyes sharp as knives. Samuel, you've been here 6 weeks. Look around you. Do you really think they see you as family? You're a charity case, a pet project, and when they've had enough, when the novelty wears off, where will you go then? Back to your truck?" Her words cut deep, but before I could answer, a small voice interrupted from the stairway. "Grandpa Samuel, is everything okay?" We all turned. Sophia stood there in her Sunday dress, holding her sister's hand. Isabella clutched a piece of paper covered in colorful scribbles. She marched forward, proudly holding it up for me. "We made you a picture!" It was a drawing of a big house with stick figures in front of it. Marcus, Elena, the twins, and in the center a gray-haired man labeled in shaky letters, Grandpa Samuel. The room went still. Daniel's face paled as his daughter's innocent voices pierced through every mask he and Melissa had worn. Sophia studied him openly, then tilted her head. "You don't look like Grandpa Samuel. Who are you?" "I'm his son," Daniel managed, stiff and defensive. "Oh," Isabella said brightly. "Then you're our cousin." The silence that followed was louder than any storm outside. Daniel's jaw tightened, his face flushing as the girl's innocent words echoed in the room. Melissa's eyes darted between me and Marcus, her carefully constructed smile slipping into something colder. "Dad," Daniel said sharply, turning back to me, "are you really letting this go on? Letting strangers call you Grandpa while your real family, your blood, is begging for help?" I felt Sophia's small hand slip into mine, warm and trusting. I looked at Daniel, the son I had raised alone, and saw not the boy I once carried on my shoulders, but a man twisted by pride and desperation. "Daniel," I said softly, "family isn't just blood. Family is who stands by you when you need them most, and these strangers, as you call them, have given me more love in 6 weeks than you have in years." Melissa let out a sharp laugh, bitter and cutting. "Love? Please, they're rich. You're convenient. The moment you're not useful anymore, you'll see exactly what you mean to them." Marcus, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, finally spoke. His voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. "That's enough." His eyes locked on Daniel and Melissa. "Samuel is not convenient. He is wanted here. He is part of this family." Daniel's face darkened. "You're really going to choose them over me? Over your own son?" I straightened, my voice steady in a way it hadn't been for a long time. "No, Daniel, I didn't choose this. You did. You threw me out. You made it clear I was nothing more than a burden. And now that you need something, suddenly I'm family again?" Melissa sneered. "We came here to make things right, and this is how you repay us." "Making things right," I said evenly, "is more than showing up when you're desperate. It's admitting the hurt you caused. It's saying sorry. Neither of you came here for me. You came here for money. And that's not love. That's convenience." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, his whole body trembling with anger. For a moment I thought he might strike me, but then his eyes hardened into something cold, unrecognizable. "You know what, Dad? Maybe we were right the first time. Maybe you are just a selfish old man who thinks the world owes him." 6 weeks ago those words would have shattered me, but now, with Sophia clutching my hand, with Isabella smiling up at me, with Marcus and Elena standing behind me, Daniel's cruelty rang hollow. "Maybe I am," I said quietly, "but I'd rather be a selfish old man who's loved than a young man who threw away the best thing he ever had." Daniel's mouth twisted, but he had no answer. He turned on his heel, Melissa close behind, and the sound of their footsteps faded until only silence remained. 2 years passed like the slow turn of seasons, and the life I once thought was over became something richer than I ever imagined. I was no longer the man abandoned on Thanksgiving Eve, no longer the father begging for scraps of affection from a son who saw me as a burden. I was something else entirely, a grandfather, a father figure, a man with a place and a purpose. On a winter morning, I stood in the nursery Marcus and I had painted together, holding a sleeping infant in my arms. Michael, my grandson, not by blood, but by choice, rested against my chest, his tiny breaths warm and steady. Through the window, the yard stretched wide and white, where Sophia and Isabella, now 9 years old, were building a lopsided snowman, their laughter echoing against the crisp air. They called me Grandpa Samuel without hesitation now, as if it had always been that way. The word no longer stung with longing. It fit me, filled me, gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. Elena appeared in the doorway, her hair still tousled from sleep, smiling softly at the sight of me with the baby. "You've got the magic touch," she whispered. "He never settles that easily for me." I smiled down at the boy in my arms. "He knows he's safe," I said quietly. That's all a child really needs. Marcus joined us a moment later, his face carrying the calm satisfaction of a man who had finally made peace with his past. Fatherhood suited him, but more than that, I could see how having me there, someone to call father, even at this stage in life, had closed a wound he thought would never heal. We stood together, watching the girls outside as they gave their snowman crooked arms and a carrot nose. Marcus leaned against the window frame and said, "This is what I always wanted for them. Laughter in the yard, a grandfather's hands guiding them, a family that feels whole." I nodded, rocking Michael gently. I had once believed family was something I'd lost forever, shattered the night Daniel turned his back on me. But as I stood in that nursery, warmth filling every corner of the room, I realized I hadn't lost family at all. I had found it in people who chose me, who saw me not as a burden, but as a blessing. This was home now, this was family, and I belonged here. The nursery was quiet, except for Michael's soft breathing, the faint creak of the rocking chair beneath me, and the muffled laughter of the girls outside. I could have sat there forever, content to hold this new life and let the peace of the moment wash over me. But then Marcus cleared his throat, and I noticed something in his expression, nervousness, but also excitement. "Samuel," he said carefully, "there's something Elena and I want to talk to you about." I looked up from the baby, my brows furrowing. "What is it?" Elena stepped into the room, her smile warm but her eyes glistening. She came to sit on the arm of the chair, gently stroking Michael's tiny hand as she spoke. "We've been thinking for a long time about how much you mean to us. You've given our children something they never had before, a grandfather's love. You've given Marcus something he thought he'd lost forever. And you've given me peace of mind. We want to make sure you never doubt where you belong." Marcus stepped closer, his voice steady now. "We want to make it official. We want to adopt you." The words struck me like a blow. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "Adopt me?" "Adult adoption," Marcus explained quickly. "It's legal. You'd be our father, officially. The girls would be your legal granddaughters. Michael, your grandson. No questions, no conditions. It would be on paper, permanent, undeniable." I looked down at the baby in my arms, then back up at them. "Why would you do that? You don't need a piece of paper to call me family." Elena touched my hand gently. "Because we don't want there to ever be a question. Not for us, not for you, not for the children. Family should be official. You deserve to know you'll never be cast aside again. Not by us." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The room blurred through the tears that welled in my eyes. My whole life I had fought to keep my son close, and he had thrown me away. And here were two people who owed me nothing, offering me a place in their lives forever. "Say yes," a voice piped from the doorway. Sophia stood there with Isabella at her side, both grinning, their cheeks pink from the cold. "We already picked out a name for you when it happens." I laughed through my tears. "Oh, really? And what's that?" "Patriarch Samuel," Isabella said solemnly, like in the history books. Their innocence, their certainty, it shattered the last wall of doubt in me. And in that moment, I knew my answer. The next days were a blur of emotion. I had said yes, though the weight of it still hadn't sunk in. Yes to being theirs. Yes to belonging. The girls celebrated as though we had already signed the papers, whispering about the ceremony and drawing pictures of our family under one name. One afternoon, Marcus called me into his study, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Elena sat beside him, Michael cradled against her chest, and Sophia and Isabella were bouncing with excitement. "We have something to show you," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the desk. I opened it slowly. The first page made my heart stop. A legal document, stamped and official, with words I had never dreamed I would see. A name change request. I looked up in disbelief. "You want to change your name? To mine?" Elena's smile was radiant. "Yes, Marcus Boyd, Elena Boyd, Sophia and Isabella Boyd, Michael Boyd. One family, one name." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "But your family name, your legacy." "My legacy," Marcus interrupted gently, "is whatever I choose it to be. And I choose to honor the man who showed me what it means to be a father. That's you." Before I could gather myself, Isabella tugged at my sleeve. "That's not the only surprise," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Come outside," Sophia urged, practically dragging me toward the front door. The whole family followed, and when I stepped onto the driveway, I froze. Parked beside Marcus's sleek car was a brand-new silver pickup truck, a red ribbon tied around the bumper, gleaming in the winter sunlight. My knees nearly buckled. "What is this?" I whispered. Your truck's been running on prayers and stubbornness, Marcus said with a laugh. You've earned something better. Consider it an early gift. Happy Gotcha Day, Grandpa Samuel, the girls shouted together, their voices bright with joy. Tears blurred my vision as I reached for the ribbon, my hand shaking. Gotcha Day? I asked. Sophia grinned. The day we got you, when you found us on the road. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my chest full to bursting. I looked at them, all of them, waiting for my reaction. Finally, I drew a long breath, steadying myself. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I was a burden, a mistake, a man without purpose. But you, my voice cracked, and I had to pause. You gave me back everything, not just a roof or a job. You gave me love. You gave me family. You gave me a reason to wake up each morning. The girls wrapped their arms around my waist. Elena wiped her own tears, and Marcus placed a firm hand on my shoulder. In that moment, I knew without question I had been chosen, and that choice was the greatest gift of all. That night, after the excitement had settled and the children were tucked into bed, I sat on the back porch with Marcus, 2 steaming mugs of coffee between us. The December air was sharp, but the warmth in my chest was stronger. From where we sat, I could see the workshop Marcus and I had built together, the treehouse that bore the girls' laughter, the garden Elena and I had planned that would bloom again come spring. Every corner of this place carried my fingerprints, my effort, my love. Hard to believe, isn't it? Marcus said quietly, sipping his coffee. 2 years ago, we didn't even know each other. I nodded slowly. 2 years ago, I thought I had nothing left, and then fate put me on that highway. He smiled. Or maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was choice. You chose to stop. You chose to help. His words sank deep. For so long, I had believed my life was shaped by what others did to me, by Daniel's rejection, by a world that had no use for an aging man. But sitting there, I realized he was right. I had chosen. And that one choice had changed everything. Inside, I could hear Elena humming softly to Michael. Upstairs, the girls' giggles drifted through the halls, even though they were supposed to be asleep. This house was full of life, full of love, and against all odds, it was mine too. Not because of blood, not because of obligation, but because they wanted me here, because they had chosen me. I thought about Daniel then, wondering if he ever regretted turning me away, wondering if he had found peace, or if he was still drowning in pride. A part of me would always mourn the son I lost, but I no longer carried the weight of his choices. I had been given something far greater, a family who saw me, valued me, and refused to let me go. I looked at Marcus, at the man who had once been a stranger in the snow, but was now my son in every way that mattered. Thank you, I said simply, for giving me a second chance. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice steady. No, thank you, for becoming the father I needed and the grandfather my children deserve. We sat in silence after that, watching the stars emerge in the clear winter sky. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole. Now I want to ask you, the one listening to my story, what does family mean to you? Tell me in the comments. And if my story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Because sometimes the people who choose you are the ones who make you whole.